In 1973, an evolutionary scientist called Lee Van Valen published an academic paper. And that academic paper was called the New Evolutionary Law. And in the New Evolutionary Law, he came up with a hypothesis which is called the Red Queen hypothesis. And that is based on a scene from the sequel of Alice in Wonderland that was written by Carroll. And the name of the book was Through the Looking Glass. And in it, there's a sentence which the Queen and Alice are running together, and the Queen is saying to Alice, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. That brings us to sex. So tonight, it's all about the roles of sexes in evolution and its relationship to information security. Yeah. Speaking about sex, there's a quote which is assigned to Molière that says, a man should be allowed to speak in public only for as long as he can make love, which is statistically speaking means that a man should be speaking for about 7 minutes. I read the statistics, more or less. And if we talk about statistics, 1 out of 10 people who work in information security are women. And that's quite a huge gap versus to other professions that we have. And in this talk, I will try to give some explanation to why I think this is happening. And I try to find a way to try to explain why I feel the reason behind it and why we must change that. My view is that we must change the current situation in which women are not really represented in our environment. And I feel that it could be helping us to even survive as a species, as companies, as organizations, as societies. Now, before I would continue, there's a warning, and that warning is the fact that I would be talking at the beginning about subject that seems to be not related to women at all. But I find the fact that we talk a lot about information security, and we tend to miss some of the concepts which are information has been here for a long time, and security has been here as a concept for a long time. And how do you tie them together, and what is the relationship with that to women? So bear with me. If it's going to be confusing, don't worry, it's going to get much worse at the end. So let's start with the relationship between. So let's try to understand. My view is that there's few things. There's information, there's technology, there's experience, and knowledge. And all of them are tied to each other in some way. So let's start with information. Information occurs when information occurs when a technology is passing through an experience. That's probably the most basic way to describe what it is. As you can see here, we have a prism, and that is a technology. It is going through an experience. The experience light goes through it. And then we get information, which is the diffusion, I think the name of it. You hear me right now, and your ears are, which is a technology, has the capability to take the sound waves and transform it into an information. So that is the first phase that we need to think. There's technology, and technology creates information via experience. No experience, no information. That goes back to the tree in the wood. If a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound? Probably not. Next phase is knowledge. So we have information. And then what happened is that we have a technology that takes the information, and the information passes through it, and then it creates knowledge. Knowledge is in the DNA. Knowledge is what happens when you hear the information, the words, or is going through your brain, and the sound waves is becoming words, and then this another process that goes through and takes those words and turns them into sentences, And then you can think, why is he talking about these things? And that's another process, which is your mind that might going to go there. So there's interconnectivity between all those things, which brings us to the point that knowledge and technology are inseparable. You cannot really have knowledge without technology, and information being generated by technology. So which comes first, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they feed each other. They feed each other in a sense of loop, because the more information you go, the more knowledge you have the capabilities to gain. And that brings us to the next phase, which is we live in a complex adaptive system. Now, complex adaptive system is a mathematical name to something which can describe very, very complicated systems. What very complicated systems do, they create a situation in which they do major two things. They give rise to new properties, which has to do anything. So you cannot really take all the sums of the system and then assume that you would understand it. They create new properties, which is most of the time new technology and information. And they do another thing, which is they self-organize. And self-organization is knowledge. So as you can see, we have this interconnection in this. There's a cycle of life. There's multiple activities. So what we have in a short, in a calculation, we have information that is being generated when the technology goes through an experience, and that information is turned into knowledge, and that knowledge is used by the technology to create more information. The system becomes extremely complicated. It goes through a cycle, and that drives up more and more and more information and knowledge and technologies. And we are in this spiral, and that spiral has a name. It's called evolution. The first information revolution was actually the universe. The universe creates where we are right now, and that's an information revolution. It doesn't have digital elements in it, but it has a lot of biological elements in it. And if you ask, why am I talking about all these things? It's because there's one thing that you don't have in the universe. You don't have time. Time have you. In the universe, time have everything. Time wins upon every technology that you can throw on it. Give it enough time. Time is endless. It's going to end. All technologies are broken in the universe. Probably, maybe if we talk about even light is being captured in a black hole. So up to the quantum level, that is probably a true statement to say. And so we have, in one hand, we have evolution. This is, by the way, Kali, a very, very nice goddess, who is standing on the body of Shiva, if I remember correctly. I just remember, she's the goddess of time, change, power, creation, preservation, and destruction. She's a very, very powerful woman. And the reason why, and because we have on one hand this endless growth, but then on the other hand we have the time. And so each and every technology tries to create a situation in which it would be able to sustain itself, to go beyond the limits of its limited time. And then we can look at different biological technologies, which is what we had up until recently, and try to see how they handle time, and try to see what it has to do with information security. So let's start with bacteria. Bacteria is a very, very simple technology. To most people, they just go like, yeah, bacteria. What it does, it replicates itself, and and then sometimes it has a genetic mutation, and then because of that, it managed to become it becomes immune to things like antibiotics. Well, that's a very common view, but if you look at research, there's a research that was done in the 90s and actually probably at the beginning of the 21st century by a scientist from Israel. And what he discovered is that bacteria actually have intelligence. Bacteria acts in a way that we would never assume a bacteria to do it. It strategizes. It strategizes for the future. It communicates with other bacteria as a colony by tweeting each other with chemical messages. Actually, 10% of our genome is bacteria. We are 10% bacteria, as much as we like it, well, 10% of our genome. We have, all our senses are related to bacteria. Bacteria has evolved to handle the environment and get information from the environment and adjust itself and become more secure to the environment. So as you can see, even from the very basic living form that we have, there is information security and there's a process for it. So bacteria, the way that it handles, replicate mainly. Then we look at actually the first time that we see female and male were with corals who started to have not only asexual but also sexual, what we call sexual. At the beginning, it was less Adam and Eve and more Adam and Steve, if you would understand me. So it was more like male and male. But then there was a growth into the point that there was more a female role and a male role. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for the creation of male and females. And the idea is that that creates a better diversity. It's, we need to think that as much as smart as we think we are, nature is, or evolution is smarter than whatever we would be able to ever imagine. And for our time, that has been the chosen approach for living animals, with the exception of, I think, mushrooms and amoebas. That's the most common way for animals to reproduce via sexual interaction. And that moves us to the next phase. So we have, we moved from a place in which we just replicate, which is more like having a rate 0, rate 1, just replicate the same, and hopefully you will survive. Then you have 2 that start to call each other, and then start a pregnancy about 400 million years ago, thanks to this wonderful animal, which is the sharks, who started to come with the idea of having a better security. The reason that sharks became so predominant in the living animals is because they came with pregnancy, and that allowed the pregnancy allowed the shark to protect the animal, the new shark in the womb. And that is the first phase that you can see, a protective environment in which you try to protect and secure it. And I can talk about this whole thing because I've been reading and watching National Geographic from here until Jerusalem. And I think that raises up to babies, to humans, and try to run a little bit to explain about us. So we are insecure systems. What I found out, and that was probably the most interesting thing about the whole research that I did, is that if you would take a human child when it is born, it is premature. How much it is premature? If a woman here, and now all the women here would understand it, if you had to bear a child and to bring it up to give it birth to the same level of maturity that the chimpanzee is, and remember they are very, very close to us, you would have to have a 21 months pregnancy. 21 months pregnancy, it is insane. And the reason why it is not like that is because we developed this huge thing here on our shoulders, which is called the brain. The human brain is so huge and so big that women had to give birth early. And that created a very interesting environment in which you have a very, very insecure system that you try to preserve. And from an evolutionary point, you know that this is the one thing that you need to do anything more than life. You discover, you can see that animals will do everything they can in order to reproduce, including dying through the process. Males, there's multiple insects that would die through that. And humans came up, and then it created a situation in which you have a preborn, and you need to have it secured. And that means there was a whole interaction that started to have. So the human interaction is very different from animal. Not totally different, because if you look at baboons, I'll probably given information about it. I think that one, yeah. That one. Baboons are very close to us, but they are sneaky bastards like you can never imagine. They are horrible creatures. There's a researcher called Robert Sapolsky, I think, from Stanford University, who did amazing research about baboons. And the thing which is interesting, they are really like, you would see the way the baboon is very, very hierarchical structure. You would see an alpha male getting upset, hitting another male. That male runs up, hitting another woman. The woman hits up, hit another male. They are really, in the stress levels that they have are very, very high. So, and then you go like, they're not like us. And then when you start to look at it, you realize that we are very much like baboons. Very, very much. It's really scary. There are some things which are different. So, for example, there's things that human beings can do that other animals can do, like empathy, deep empathy for people which we never met, like abstract empathy. And that has to do a lot with the women. Because nature knows that you need to give birth to a child, and that child is totally dependent on you. So nature rewires a woman to be extremely protective and extremely securing of the child. And that brings up to the point that we in information security, majority of us are men. But if you look at the way nature has, so if a child is a knowledge system, in nature, females are protecting of that thing, not males. Many species kill their infants, even human beings do that. We are not the only ones. There's a lot of species that do that. And so women has evolved to protect the child, and there's a lot of strategies that relates to that. I think that brings us back to this, which is what is special about humans is that we develop a culture of compassion that allows us to have that capability to take a system and bring it into a maturity. Now, I know the words compassion and information security doesn't seem connected to anybody here because we are extremely focused on technology. But I want to remind people that if you look historically, women and men were actually equal in the, let's describe it, the pre-agricultural revolution. Women and men were equal. They were hunting with men, they were gathering with men sometimes, and in many times they were leading the community. And what changed is that technology came and men became obsessed with it because it is men are more powerful physically than women. It is hard. Don't take me for example because I'm not the fittest person in the room here, but usually a pregnancy of a male is much more demanding for a woman than a female. And there's a reason the male has historically more power, and that when the agricultural revolution came, it allowed the stronger men to start to possess, to have possession. And then men started to take more women, and because they have more resources and they can hold this thing and they can live with that. And that starts to be a feeling of a deja vu to me when I was starting to look at it, because we are right now going through another revolution of information. In the past, it was agricultural revolution, which was a technological one, and now we have another technological one. And guess what? Men are again starting again to create a gap. Now, if we look back at history, we weren't that good as men. We as a society that was led by men was led into endless fights. You remember the baboons? We are very much like that. We are very much, the amount of pain and misery, which we can see what happened in Paris, is so huge. And if you compare that to monkey society, there's only one type of monkey called bonobos, and they are monkeys which are extremely similar to chimpanzees. And the difference is that they have almost no fight in them, no violence in them. It's led by women, and you can read more about how they make peace, because it's not for this discussion. And as I said again, technological evolution created a gap, and we are creating another technological revolution right now, and that gap is a big issue for us. I think it's a big issue for society and a big issue for humanity, because again, you would see a very aggressive baboon type. I'm going to use that baboon type attacks, very egocentric, very focused on I have power, that I can do whatever I want. And that's a very, very male approach, while women have a different approach to it. So let's try to look at it. Remember the queen hypothesis that I mentioned at the beginning? Let's try to look at it. So we think, we have this perception, okay, technology would solve our issues, and that we can solve our problems. And that thing is, I would try to show you that it's wrong, because, okay, we build technology in order to try to solve the problem. So we have a lot of information. If you would give me more information, would I be better? No. If you would give me more information, or if you give me the same information in a higher level of technology, I would be able to generate more knowledge out of it. Great. The thing is that when you generate more knowledge, then you create more information out of it. So now we are in this endless loop in which we are trying to pull ourselves out of a technological race that we created in ourselves, in which we are trying to increase our level of security, but by increasing the level of technology. And it doesn't work. Security doesn't come from technology. Time eats it. So time is winning it anyhow. You can say whatever you want. From a cryptographic standpoint, that's a given. If you would give enough time and enough resources, you can break any encryption. Probably with the exception of a quantum one. So we're stuck. Where do we go? I think the first thing we need to try to think is we try to see if we can go into a level of equality. The main thing which is really scaring a lot of people is, okay, we know that we have a problem in information security. We know that we push technology to try to solve it, but we need to push more technology into it. And it doesn't work. We tried it for years right now, and it still doesn't work. And in many ways, we are like, if anybody knows the Baron Munchausen story, that he was stuck in a swamp with his horse, and he was going deep inside the swamp, and he managed to save himself and I think his horse as well, by pulling himself out, by pulling his hair by himself, which is more or less what we try to do with technology. We try to pull ourselves by using more technology, and that doesn't really work. The other problem is that we try to say, well, if that doesn't work, when what works, and that comes up the point, well, it's going to be something different, and then logically people go like, no, I cannot get that. And it's very much similar to meditation. If anybody does meditation here, and I do, the strangest thing in the world when you do meditation is that it's the most counterintuitive thing in the world. Because if I don't feel happy, if I feel sad or stressed, the first thing that I get is this stream of thoughts that comes into me. I need to do that, and I need to do that. There's something that speaks in my head. And this voice that speaks in my head who tries to solve things, the only way to actually solve things is to stop, which is my voice. And I would do meditation, and for the beginning, the voice doesn't stop. And in many ways, that voice is the same voice of technology that we see right now. I have seen so many technologies. Every time there's next generation, next generation, next generation. All the time there's a next generation that comes up, and there's a promise that says to us that technology would solve. And I think there's one thing which is missing is the human factor. And the human factor needs to be addressed, and the human factor cannot be addressed in the same tools that we handle it until now. So, women actually are good in confidentiality. You'll find nature that women actually would hide their. Actually, we had a discussion a little bit with Karen a little bit before, who speak after me. There's a lot of women in privacy, and there's a reason for it, because privacy is something that most women would feel intuitively connected with, because it is a very, very natural thing for women. They need to protect their child. They need to protect themselves from predators, for men. And so privacy has been something that has been evolving women for a long time, even during the periods of monkeys. So that's a very, very important thing for women, the privacy and the protection of confidentiality. Integrity, the integrity, try to think of integrity of culture. The one that actually is in charge of the integrity of a culture is the woman. Men like to say that they are creating the culture, but at the end of the day, try to think of an environment, not right now when there's much less children, but if you have like, I have a friend who has 13 children. There's no way on earth that my friend is in control of that house, and he knows it. His wife organized it. It's an organized mess, but it's being led by the women in the house. And the women are much more in charge of the creating. So if integrity is the integrity of the culture, which is a knowledge system, they are the one who protects the integrity of that system. So it's a natural thing for women to do that. And availability, again, the knowledge, there's actually the one thing that makes, if the knowledge to be sustained, it needs to be available, and for that availability, one reproduce. Now, there's an interesting story because in the Victorian time, when Darwin was publishing his work, the one animal that he really didn't like was the peacock, because the peacock goes around, this huge, beautiful animal goes around, and for hours tried to convince a female to go to mate with him. It's as if, and that was totally contradictory to the idea of women having a choice. Women wouldn't have a choice. Women's in the house, doing whatever has been assigned to her in society. And when you start to look deeper into females in nature have much more choice than we actually imagine. So they are in much more control of availability of a knowledge system than us monkeys like to admit it. And I want to let's end up with this. If everybody knows what this saying, this is a Vulcan salute or greeting, which is live long and prosper. And it was created by the late Leonard Nimoy, who just died recently. And when he came up with this idea, because, reminder to anybody who doesn't know what Star Trek is, he was a Vulcan. He was the most logical person on the Enterprise, and he was not really good with feelings. No, that wasn't really his stuff. And the thing which is interesting is that person who created that character very much chose this, which is the Jewish symbol for Shin, for the letter Shin, which is Shalom, which means peace, and Shekhinah, and Shaddai, which are the names of God, the feminine names of God. So we tend to look at our environment in a very, very, we try to think that God is like us, a lot of people, or representing or taking the words of God, and God is very full of anger, but we attend as a society, as you saw what happened in Paris again, is that we tend to forget that there is a huge level of compassion and kindness and love and happiness and stillness that are represented by the female power. And I know that it has nothing, seems to be nothing to do with information security, but if you think to yourself, awareness is the biggest problem that we have in information security. If you would go to everybody who have discussion, go like, yeah, it's unable to make people to be aware. And the solution for awareness would not come from technology. The solution for awareness would come from the interconnectivity that is a very, very much the power, the feminine power. Thank you.